Chapter 2. The Other Boys. The Punts was still asleep when Jack returned, and he made it to his room without being caught. But his stomach ached with a new kind of sadness, and he stayed in the attic when the old owl woman called that it was time for dinner. It was the fox boy that bothered him. A few years older than Jack, but in much newer clothes, and cared for by Dr. Walraven. Most nights he would envy the bedtime stories. Tonight, he envied the protection. When the other boys finished dinner and came upstairs, he feigned sleep, but he knew that it was useless. He'd caused them too much trouble to be left alone. Sure enough, the door had only just given the telltale click as the Punts locked it behind them, when a stubby finger jabbed painfully at Jack's ribs. He rolled over and sat up, pressing his back to the window as he did so. There were 12 of them in total, all bunnies, and all bigger than Jack. The 3 biggest surrounded his bed, and the remaining 9 either watched with interest from their own beds, or else pretended to be asleep. The boy that poked him was called Gale. He was the biggest and the dumbest. "You got a big stupid mouth to go with them big stupid ears," Gale jibed. The other boys laughed appreciatively. Jack, his eyes wide and his arms hugging his knees, made no response. He could hate the living guts out of these boys all he wanted, but that wouldn't stop them from beating the living guts out of him any time they wanted. "Don't got much to say now, though, do we?" Gale laughed. The Ostley twins, tall and slender with narrow faces, leaned against either bedpost, but Gale dropped himself down directly onto the mattress. He reached out and grabbed Jack's jaw, pressing his cheeks together and causing his lips to pucker. "Oh, 4s!" Gale swore. "He's shaking. You gonna pee your pants, Jack?" At this, the Ostley twins laughed even louder, as did several voices from the surrounding darkness. "Now," Gale continued in his most businesslike tone, "we got some things to discuss, don't we? Things like why it is a very bad idea to try to get me into trouble." At this point, Jack may have been able to escape the situation unscathed. Gale was mad, but he'd say some humiliating things, make the other boys laugh, and that would be that. But Jack could never keep his mouth shut when someone was in the wrong. "You took Mr. Hargrove's flask while he was sleeping." "So what if I did?" Still shaking, Jack rallied his courage and pressed on. So it's wrong to steal, and that's alcohol. You shouldn't be drinking it." Gale leaned back, putting a paw on Jack's forehead and banging his head against the window. "You dope! That old drunk's the one what shouldn't be drinking it. I was doing him a favor, don't you see? And if drinking alcohol is what I gotta do to help that poor old man, well," he adopted a saintly expression, "then I'll drink it." The Ostleys tittered stupidly. "But now I got nothing," Gale pressed on, "and even after all your stupid ninny tattling, the Punts still thought you took it." At this, he let out a forced, heavy laugh. For a moment there was silence in the room, as if Gale had run out of insults, or perhaps was getting bored with this game. His attention turned to the torn and faded poster of King of Hearts alongside Jack's bed. "I heard you talking to that rat," Gale said, emphasizing the last word as if it were a swear. "We was in the alley. I heard you crying about the sidekick program." He adopted a high-pitched whine. "Wah! But I want to be a sidekick! Boo-hoo!" The other boys howled at this. "What kind of superhero would you be, Jack?" Gale continued. "Bedwetter bunny? Oh, I know. You could be called the Snitch, like how you snitched on me earlier." At this, the humor was lost from Gale's voice, and the smile faded from his lips. Jack's eyes shot toward the door. It had been a long time since he had actually bothered to get out of bed and check that the door was indeed locked. In living memory, the door had only remained unlocked once, and he'd used the opportunity for nothing more than an attempt to snag leftover casserole. But now, a wonderful idea stole over him. If he could get out that door, he could get downstairs and outside. He didn't know where he'd go, nor what would keep him from being returned by the police the moment he was found. But he didn't care. Adventure and freedom were beyond that door. But the door had clicked, and Jack was locked in for the long haul with 3 vengeful bullies and 9 spectators. Gale seemed to come alive with an idea of his own. "You know what, boys?" he said, not taking his eyes off the cowering bunny. "I think it's time we summoned Petrillo." The other boys laughed as Gale stood and moved to his own bed in the far corner of the room, reaching beneath the mattress. "It's true what they say, you know," Gale continued, turning again and fondling a closed switchblade. The boards creaked ominously below his weight as he stepped slowly, deliberately toward his prey. "Petrillo is real. It comes in the night and kidnaps naughty boys, cheats, babies, snitches. It drags them away to its lair." A bone-chilling ch sounded as the knife snapped open. "And it eats them," Gale said, a hungry look in his eyes. The other boys grabbed Jack's limbs. He fought desperately, but he was no match for even one of them. They pinned him to the bed. When he tried to call out, he got no further than "Mrs. P," before his mouth was full of one of the twins' elbows. "Oh, hold still," Gale demanded, sounding childish. "We can't summon the demon without a blood offering." The blade gleamed in the blue light pouring in from the window. Jack's eyes were gleaming too, as he tried desperately to pull himself from the strong grips on his limbs. A muffled sob coughed its way out of his dry throat. Gale's paw was steady as he pointed the knife forward, as though he was demanding an old lady's purse. "Give it to me," this pose seemed to say, and it was at this moment that Jack's right leg escaped its captor and did just that. Whap! Straight up between Gale's legs. The boy folded over in a howl of pain, his knife dropping to the floor and slipping between 2 boards. In their surprised laughter and the uncomfortable silence that followed, the twins had loosened their grip enough for Jack to pull free. He bounded around Gale and groped hopelessly at the doorknob. Unlocked. He could swear he had heard the click, but the door swung open freely. Stairs passed beneath his feet, and he made it to the 2nd-floor landing before he heard the 3 boys giving chase. When Jack arrived on the 1st floor, Mrs. Punts had not yet come out of her room. He grabbed the front door handle and tore outside, the others now hot on his heels. Gale's fingers brushed his collar as he descended the front steps. When the older boy's feet hit the pebble-strewn cement, he slipped, tumbled forward, and landed hard on his stomach. Jack reached the city street along which he had followed the newspaper, and found it unusually empty. He looked both directions, not sure if he wanted help or a hiding place. Deciding not to linger on the question, he turned right and sprinted off along the sidewalk. He could hear the other boys coming to the main street now. Not knowing where to go, Jack let his feet carry him down side streets and across small neon-lit parking lots, clutching at a stitch that was forming in his side. As he rounded a corner between 2 shabby buildings, he found his way blocked by a chain-linked fence. Razor wire was coiled along the top, but it had been lazily placed. One side didn't reach the wall, giving just enough space for Jack to fit through. He climbed the fence, knowing as he did so that the rattling it made would give him away. Nearing the top, his right leg became hooked in a barb. Desperately, he tugged at it, hearing a small tearing sound as the ankle of his pants leg began to rip. He tugged again. A paw caught his bare foot. "Gotcha!" Gale shouted, pulling Jack's foot down toward him. As he did so, the pant leg became free of the wire. Lucky break, Jack thought as he jerked his foot free and dropped down on the other side of the fence. Up ahead, a maze of train cars sat in a cloud of fog that looked green under the lights. Row upon row were lined up before a tall station building. He ran between 2 boxcars. To his left, he saw the open bay door of a baggage car at the end of a train. Whether he was cornering himself or not, Jack couldn't run another block. Jogging crookedly to the opening, he pulled himself inside and, as quietly as he could, slid the door shut, leaving himself in blackness. Heart pounding heavily against his ribs, he backed himself against a shelf along the far wall. His paws groped behind him, finding what felt like a suitcase. Continuing his blind search, he found a gap between a stack of cardboard boxes and a duffel bag, hoisted himself onto the shelf, and squished between them. The crackle of gravel just outside of the car made his heart jump. He held his breath as the footsteps came to a stop. "Anything?" came a voice from a little farther off. Gail's voice. "No," said the twin outside. "Nothing over here." The footsteps moved away. "That's right, Jack Roberts," Gail called, his voice cracking boyishly as he taunted. "You get your tail out of here, and don't you ever come back." "Don't worry," Jack thought through angry tears. "I won't." A dry sob escaped his throat, then another. He began to cry in earnest. It was several minutes before the tears subsided and his lids became heavy. He fell asleep in the baggage car, his head resting on the soft duffel bag which, in the light, would show a tag with the letters EW.